Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning at Zion Pickerington on our Sunday morning feed for a just wonderful Sunday morning. It's the middle of December almost, and I don't know about you, but this is just one of my favorite seasons. Just Christmas with all the Christmas lights and everything like that. It's just always such a joy. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Abby Jarman, and I'm the operations manager here at Zion Pickerington. And I get the privilege this morning of speaking to you all about something that is very dear to my heart, the gift of process. I have always had a tug of war kind of with what process is and the process that process is. Process is always the pathway that takes us to a promise. Last week, Pastor Josh gave an amazing message about promises. If you did not get to listen to it, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to it. And kind of off of that, I just felt led for me to kind of give something out to you guys this week that is very, very special to me. Probably about 5 or 6 years ago, the Lord led me on a journey for almost a year where really the only thing I was allowed to learn about was process. I had to eat, sleep, drink, breathe what process was. I had gone through a period of time where promises that I thought were going to come to completion and come about didn't happen, and grew weary, grew frustrated, grew anxious in regards to what it looked like to obtain a promise. And the Lord just kind of spoke to me and asked me to embrace what process was, to look up and to learn everything that process was, to try to embrace it and make it a gift. The road that leads to a promise can be a blessing if you will embrace it. My journey of finding my husband now, John Jarman, he is such a gift to me. And I remember seasons where I just ached for my partner and for my husband. And the Lord took me through a journey of looking at what it looked like to be single, to embrace that. And I eventually was able to actually get to a place where my prayer wasn't for actually John to come. It was, Lord, please don't let that person come until I have fulfilled every desire you have for me in this season of process that you want me to fulfill as a single person before my partner comes. Because we will together have our own path that you'll have us walk, but there is only one path that I can walk as a single person. Help me to embrace that. Help me to see that to completion before that person comes. And the journey to getting to that place, I promise, wasn't a pretty one. But I eventually got to that place where I was so willing to embrace the season that I was in, the process of what I was already in, that the promise that did lie on the other side, I was willing to embrace what I was already in until that came. Basically put, a promise is a desire that there is a guarantee it will happen. We always promise things to ourselves, to other people. I promise that I will get this completed. I promise this will be taken care of. As humans, we are not always capable of seeing that to fulfillment. I know many a year I have started in January with my goals for the year and have not seen them to completion, but they're a promise I've made over myself. But the promises that God puts over us, they will come to pass. There is no way that they will ever be canceled, that they won't come to completion, especially as long as we partner with Him to see them come about. If it's on your heart, it's on God's heart. I remember when somebody told that to me years ago. If it's on your heart, it's on God's heart. He doesn't give us desires in our heart unless they're things that He already desires for us. I always use this example in my brain when I'm thinking about that, as I never dreamed of becoming a nurse or a surgeon. Like, that was never something that is in my realm of desire. I never desired to be somebody who was in theater. I never desired to do this, or this. But other people, those are things that they want to see come to completion. They are things that people desire to see come about, and they're promises that God has laid inside their heart that He wants them to see to completion if they will partner with Him to see it done. Process. So backing it up a little bit after the promise or before the promise is process. Process, simply put, is a series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. So all of us are in process. Every single person that I've ever met, you are all in process in regards to something in your life. It may be something big. It may be something small. It may be a promise that you feel like God has gifted over your life. It may be a dream that we have for ourselves. And for a lot of us, we may not even realize we're actually in process of walking towards something. God just hasn't revealed it to us yet, but He's starting the process of taking us towards it. All of the Christian life is process. For every single one of us, we are all in the process of becoming something that we currently aren't. We want to become a better wife, a better husband, a better sibling, a better child, a better mother, a better father, a better employee, that we desire to become something more than what we currently are. We're never done with it. It never ends. It's always ongoing process. The moment a promise comes to fruition, there's a whole nother piece that God is in the process of unveiling for His next thing for your life. That is something that I have come to fully love and embrace, is that ability to kind of watch the process that God is doing in my life and in other people's lives, especially. Almost any friend or family that I have has learned and heard me speak about process at one point or another over the past few years, and how much I have come to embrace it and love it. And how much process feeds into every single destiny and promise that every single one of us have. And probably the greatest piece that I want to give to you all is there is not a single promise, there is not a single process that all of us are walking through that is more important than somebody else's. Every single one of our processes and promises are just as equally important in the eyes of God. He cares about our desires. He cares about all of the little tiny things, the little prayers that we've prayed in hopes of something coming to fruition that we may not even remember that we've kind of said internally towards Him, but He remembers all of it, and all of it's important in His eyes. Probably one of the other things I could gift to you is to just embrace the fact that process is messy. Process is not going to be some beautiful story that has a very quick and easy road to the end of its fruition, to the end where the promise is fulfilled. Process is messy. It has its ups and downs. It has its ebbs and flows. It has just all of these pieces that tie into getting you to the promise that do not look pretty. One of my favorite pictures of that is Joseph. And as he was given a dream of what he would be someday, and as he shared it with people, he was actually broken by his brothers. He was cast aside. He was left for dead, basically. And as he walked through the process of his life, walking to that promise, it's so messy. One of those stories that it's like, man, that is just a story of overcoming all the obstacles that are in your life to be able to get to the promise that's at the end. And Joseph never let go of that promise. He never cast it aside, even though all of life looked like it did not want to see that promise come to fruition. He held it near and dear and never cast it aside and continued to chase towards that, no matter what was faced in front of him, so that he could continue the process of embracing embracing the journey that it was to get to the promise. I remember as a little girl, I had a desire to see something come to fruition. I don't remember what it was, but I very vividly remember this picture that my mother gave me. She walked into the living room, and out of a drawer, she pulled a small tapestry. For those of you who don't know what a tapestry is, it's basically a piece of art that is created through thread or yarn. And on the front, it's this beautiful picture that you're in the process of weaving. But on the back side, your needle and thread, as it's coming through, it isn't a pretty picture on the back side. It's threads going from one side to another and being super messy on the back. A lot of them that I've ever seen are just a jumble of thread, honestly, and it doesn't look like it makes any sense. So I remember my mom showing me the backside of this tapestry and saying, "This is what right now. This is what this looks like for you currently. It's a mess. It doesn't make any sense. It looks confusing. It looks like the picture has completely gotten messed up, but it hasn't." And she flipped it over and she showed me the completed beautiful picture. And she said, "This is what will happen. This is what you're walking towards. You're walking towards a completed picture that you can't see the end result yet for, but it is being created. This is what God is doing inside of you. It's what He is creating as a masterpiece of your life. He's creating this beautiful story that at the end will have this completed picture. But on the backside right now, it looks messy and it's hard." That always stuck with me. And when I started to embrace and going through this season of learning what process was, I realized it's like I had forgotten that picture, and it came flooding back to me and became this perfect picture of what it looked like to walk through process. So God is always seeing the picture of what He's building in each of our lives, even if we don't. All of those different steps that you're walking through currently, they are taking you towards the promises He has for you. The wrong picture is if we feel like we have to have it all together. Like, we don't have to be that front side of the tapestry that already looks like a picture. We get the ability to have the opportunity to embrace the backside of a tapestry, the messy, disturbed look of what it looks like to actually get to the promise. Going through life, going through the process is messy. It's not going to be pretty. And I just encourage you, if you're in a place where you are feeling that you're just bogged down by the messy of what it is that you're currently walking through, go and unburden that to your closest friends and family. We get that privilege of being authentic, of being raw, of being messy with the ones that we're the closest with. It's a privilege that God gave us so that we don't have to feel like we have it all together all the time. There's not a single one of us that has it all together. We all live in a world nowadays where social media, just really social media, gives us the ability to make us look like we have this pretty picture and this perfect life. And we really don't. There's not a single person, there's not a single one of us that is living a perfect life that has it all figured out. Every single one of us is walking down a path that is messy, that is full of ups and downs, and it's all in this pathway of getting us to where God is taking us. And so I just encourage you to go find a friend, go find a family member that you can just unburden the bogged down, messy burden that sometimes process feels like while we're waiting for something to come to completion. The outcome of what it is that we're walking towards, that is actually not what is successful. What is successful is the process that we take to get to the promise. It's in your yes to God, by giving Him a fresh yes every day, to be able to take you down the process that He has for us. That is what is successful. That is what allows us to walk into the promise fulfilled. One of my favorite verses is Ecclesiastes 3:11, and it just simply says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." It's just such a familiar verse for all of us, and it continues to go on beyond that. But I just love that phrase. Just He makes everything beautiful in its perfect timing. Never too soon, never too late. Rushing into the new to try to force something, to try to happen, to go into the next, the next the next part of the journey would be a mangled mess and twisted and broken and not complete if we were not able to embrace the now that we're in and be able to walk out the process of taking us each step of the way. If we don't pay attention to that, and we don't try, if we try to rush it, it will not be successful the way God wants it to be. It won't be to completion the way He wants it to be. Patience is a virtue because of the work that it takes in ourselves to trust Him completely. Patience is one of those words that all of us love and we hate all at the same time. It's just not an easy word to embrace, but it is also a beautiful picture of just sitting at His feet and waiting. The process is what prepares us for what God has up ahead for us and gives us the strength necessary to sustain and keep what God is releasing to us. So if we are able to embrace the process of what we're walking through currently, it allows for us to give us the tools that we need currently so that when we get to the promise at the end, we're able to walk in that promise fully in the way that He wants us to. I think of it like schooling. None of us enjoyed school, or at least nobody that I know. I'm sure there's some people who actually loved it, but school always felt like a burden. It was like, man, I just want it to be done. But it got us to a place where we were eligible, we were able to be something that we were achieving towards. I remember in college that I left college and came home and did a Bible school college just because that was the road that I felt like I was taking. Some of my friends finished their 4 years. Others went on to do their master's and their doctorate and now have the ability to be a person because of their education that they wouldn't have been able to if they had just decided to skip all of that. So the process that it took to get them to that place is what enabled them to embrace and hold the positions that they now carry. You will not get the results you want if you try to rush the process. That is probably one of the hardest things that I learned through just learning what process looked like and trying to learn the different steps of it, is that I can't rush it. There's really personally, physically no way to do that. But you can try as much as you want to. You can sit there and pray and agonize and cry out to the Lord for this picture of this promise that you have in your mind to come to fruition. But you can't actually make it happen the way God wants it to be birthed. You have to wait for His timing, or else it's not complete. So another picture that I love to give in regards to this piece, that you can't rush the timing, is a house. A house, how it's built. If you've ever driven through a neighborhood that's being created from the ground up, or you have built a house yourself from scratch, there's always an order to it. You can't put the roof on until certain pieces are completed. You have to start with the foundation. The foundation is the key to everything. The foundation is the key to being able to make sure that the walls stay sturdy, that all of the pieces and parts that are involved inside of that house, once the walls go up, enable it to stay. Without that foundation piece, it would be in jeopardy of the weather corrupting it, not being able to have it be the full picture that it needs to be, so that when the roof finally goes on and the house is completed, it's all able to withstand all of that. That's what happens when we embrace the journey. Is He's always building a foundation first towards any promise. The foundation, I like to think of it as the secret place. It's in your personal time with Him where the foundation is going to be built and given the roots it needs to have the promise stand on it when it comes to fruition. All of the walls and windows and all of those different pieces, those are going to be parts of the process of getting to the promise. But without that secret place part first, that's where He whispers the promises to us. That's where He ushers in a new promise over our lives. That's where He's able to speak to us about this peace that's coming in our life, and enables for us to have that relationship with Him, to be able to then have Him start building the walls on the promise, to start building the windows on the promise, so that when He gets to the end and is able to put that promise in place, that roof in place over a promise, that it's done in a way that is you partnering with Him to see it done the way He designed it to be. He always builds in order. He will never, ever build out of order. And I like to also think of process as being like a seed. A seed, when it is buried in the ground, it actually has to be broken before it's able to grow. So I actually have a really funny picture in regards to this. This past year, my husband John and I, we planted a garden. It was a beautiful garden. Almost 95% of the plants that we got were already pre-grown to a certain height. And so they were really easy. We just had to dig the holes and plant the plant right in, and then nurture the plant from there with water and nutrients and soil and all of those pieces. But one of my favorite plants is actually an elephant ear. It's one of the very few tropical plants that is able to be grown around this area during the summer. And it's so interesting because it's a giant bulb, and you plant it in the ground, and at the end of the season, you can actually uproot it, hide it in your garage, and then plant it again the following year, and it will continue to grow. But it grows these beautiful giant leaves. I've always loved it because it just takes up a lot of space, and it looks so exotic and is beautiful, and it's so much fun to watch these leaves unfurl as it's growing. But I planted 4 of these bulbs at the end of May. All the rest of my plants were flourishing throughout the summer, and throughout the month of June, everything was growing so beautifully, so perfectly. But these elephant ears never grew. And I could not figure out why they weren't growing. I'd always grown them in pots previously. I had never done it in the ground. And I got to a place where it was like, well, I must have just gotten bad bulbs. They must just be dead. And I can't tell you the number of times I actually went and undug the grass to see if they were still there. And they were still there. They just were laying there. And it seemed like nothing was happening to them. And I remember in the middle of July, all of a sudden seeing this little green piece coming out of the ground from one of them. And I actually mistook it for a weed. I was literally going to pull it out of my garden thinking it was a weed. But as I got closer, I realized it had a thickness to it that wasn't quite like a weed. And when I got close, I realized it's like that's where I had actually planted one of my elephant ears. And elephant ears, when they start to bloom, they just grow so fast. Literally from one day to the next, you can have a complete leaf grow and unfurl if it's being nurtured correctly. And so this one bulb started to just burst forth in the middle of July. I'd literally been watering and feeding my entire garden, and nothing was happening for almost 2 months. And then all of a sudden it birthed. And within 2 or 3 days, 3 of the other bulbs burst forth as well. And it was this beautiful picture. It's like, man, I got so impatient. I went and kept literally digging up the bulb to see if it was still there. Is there something wrong with it? Are you dead? And instead of just trusting the process and knowing that in its perfect timing in the ground, it would burst forth. It just continued to need heat and water and nutrients, and I just needed to leave it alone. But that's what a seed does, is a seed goes into the ground, and until it reaches the place where it's of the perfect growing season and growing, I don't know exactly what the correct terminology for gardening is, but it gets to this perfect place where the seed can then start to actually unhatch like an egg, and the outer part of it bursts forth into an actual plant. And it can't happen until it reaches the perfect area of its growth to be able to have that happen. So I'm going to give another story from the Bible just that has to do with process and promises, and it's in Luke 1. And this is about Mary when she is told that Jesus is going to be born, which I just love that story, especially at this time of year, just because it is the story. It's the reason why we celebrate Christmas, is because of Christ's birth. But in Luke 1:38, it says, "I am the Lord's servant," Mary answered. "May your word be to me fulfilled." Then the angel left her. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. When she came, Elizabeth's baby leapt for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her. So I love this picture because, first of all, Mary's response to the angel coming and telling her that Christ was going to be born in her was not to think that she was crazy, not to think that there's no way that's physically possible. She knew she was a virgin. She knew that she would never have the capacity to actually birth a child because she hadn't ever she hadn't been married to Joseph yet. But she was willing and able to embrace already what the angel said and said, "Let it be unto me as you have said," immediately embracing this promise that the Lord was bestowing upon her. And in an effort to embrace it even further, she immediately got up and left and went to go be with her cousin Elizabeth, whose baby, who was already growing in her womb, recognized the Christ inside of her and leapt in the presence of the baby. And I always have loved that because it's this picture of her going and surrounding herself with somebody's promise that is already being seen. Somebody's promise that is already coming to fruition, so that while she can't see her promise yet being birthed, she's able to see somebody else's so that she can embrace what has been bestowed upon her. Part of what taught me about that whole verse was actually a teaching by Stephanie Gretzinger that I heard years ago. And I'm actually just going to read you a small quote, and it has helped me just as I've walked through seasons of process on my own. And she basically says, "Mary surrounded herself in testimony when she couldn't see her promise and celebrated what was already there. If you are carrying a promise and you haven't seen it and you feel like it isn't showing, go find someone whose promise is showing and celebrate with them. Celebrate that their promise is coming to pass. You will feel that promise start to jump in you. We are all carrying and waiting for something. We have to be willing to let it go the process that it needs to go. When you are in love with God, you aren't afraid to say yes. When you get close to him, you say, here's everything. You can have it all. I'm going to trust you to grow this thing inside of me because I don't know how to do it, and I want this promise to come out with all its arms and legs. I want this to be healthy and whole. That is just such a picture of what it looks like to wait for a promise. If we were to have a premature baby, there are so many complications that come with that. You have to have it in the hospital for a long period of time. It has to be constantly monitored. And every mother, every father desires for their child as it's growing in the womb to be grown to completion, grown to the fullness that God desires for it to be. And if we try, if it comes out prematurely, a lot of times there's health complications that come with it. And so I look at that picture and I just see what it looks like to try to jump. Like if I was to jump ahead of what God wanted the birthing of my promise to be, it's not going to look the perfect way he wants it to be. One of the key things is carrying that promise with you into every season. Whether you've walked into a new season where there's another promise that's being birthed, that other promise still is in the process of being seen to completion. It hasn't been forgotten. The journey to getting to a promise is the best part. Process and enjoying the process and seeing the beauty that's around you in the current moment is such a privilege. What a privilege it is that we get to actually embrace where we are currently, to ask him, is there anything else that you have for me in this current moment that I'm missing, that you want to bestow upon me, that you want to put inside of me, that you want me to do to help get me to the end place so that I am in this place at the end where it's a full picture. Philippians 1:6, it says, have patience. God isn't finished yet. He hasn't forgotten, and he hasn't just moved on. Those small little prayers that you're giving, he hasn't forgotten about them. This is one of the key things that I would like to give to you guys, is the fact that part of the joy in the process is lost through the unknown defiance against the act of patience, trust, and reliance on God, his word, and his love for us. If we don't start to embrace the joy of what it is that we're in, we're missing part of what it is that he's trying to give to us. And we're actually being defiant against him. We're being defiant against that promise, that and the wholeness of what it is that he's trying to birth through us. If we don't and do it with patience and trust and reliance and joy. My last story that I'm going to kind of gift is Abraham. Abraham is one of my favorite people in regards to promises. He was told by the Lord that he would have more descendants than all the stars in the sky and in the sand on the beaches. And then the Lord went silent for 13 years. He didn't hear from the Lord again in regards to what this promise was. In Genesis 15:5, it says, look up at the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them. Then he said to them, so shall your offspring be. And then again in Genesis 22:16, Abraham is tested about sacrificing Isaac and was willing to follow through. But then the Lord finally speaks to him and says, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. God was silent in between that period, but Abraham never gave up. He never stopped believing in that promise. And a lot of times actually when I go out and I look at the stars, I love to actually picture it as Abram before he became Abraham. To sit there and just night after night, when I couldn't fully embrace my promise because I hadn't seen it come to fruition yet, choosing to surround myself with the things that God had shown me as the end result, that it's going to be more numerous than the stars, and that he would walk outside and just stare up at the stars every single night and just say, yes, I embrace it. I partner with you, God. Help me to see it to completion, even though I can't see anything that looks like it's going to actually help me get there. And it's actually a beautiful picture because I don't know about you, but even though Abraham has had so many descendants from himself now, the number of stars in the sky and the number of grains of sand on the seashore, there's absolutely no way that that promise still actually hasn't been fully fulfilled. That we are still living in a day and age where that promise to Abraham is still being fulfilled by the Lord. We are still getting to live in the beautiful picture of a promise that God spoke to a man thousands upon thousands of years ago, and trust that he trusted the Lord for and passed away before he could even see it come to fruition. But in heaven, God gets to say continually to Abraham, I'm still doing it today. I'm still fulfilling your descendants today. That is just such a beautiful picture of how God sees a promise, that it's not this be all end all with this cutoff date. It's actually so much bigger and so much greater than anything we can comprehend. We only get this much of the picture. We get this much because this is what our brains are capable of holding on to. So he gives it to us in small pieces, but the actual fullness of the promises that are over our life, they're never seen to completion until we're with the Lord in heaven. He is continuing to birth new promises and promises that are birthed off of other promises that are fulfilled. It's just such a beautiful thing to get to embrace the current thing that we're in, knowing that no matter what, those promises that he's birthed over us will come to completion. He's got you. He's got this whole situation wherever you're at in the process of waiting for a promise. Your dream, your promise, it hasn't been lost. He hasn't forgotten it. And like I've said before, that prayer that you prayed, he has not forgotten it. It hasn't been misplaced. It hasn't been buried under a pile of all the other things that you have cried out from your heart towards him since that prayer. And he didn't throw it away. He didn't deem that prayer not worthy to see completed. He's got this. He's in the process of weaving this beautiful picture of your life. And he is the only one who can see it to the absolute complete perfection that he designed for it to be. And I just challenge you guys, just as you go about this week, just to learn what it looks like to embrace the season that you're in right now, the place that you're in right now, while you're waiting for whatever it is that he's birthing in you. What does it look like to embrace where I am right now? That I would just challenge you to ask the Lord this week, what is it that you would like to give me in this season that I may have been missing? What is it that I may have not even thought that you want to bestow upon me right now? How can I currently embrace this season and fall in love with it while I wait for the promise to be fulfilled? How can I partner with you and take the steps today to continue to help us get to that end picture you have for me? And I just encourage you to embrace that process is a gift in itself. I don't know about you, but I have had many promises come to pass that the Lord has birthed in me prematurely. But every single time I actually get to the promise, it's actually the journey of getting there that was the gift. The process of getting to that promise. I had loved as I looked back at the season that I walked through to get me there, I realized how much of a joy it was to help get me to that place. Despite all the tears and tribulation and prayers and all of the things that I had to walk through to get me there, the process was the gift. It wasn't actually the promise. The promise is the pieces that he has over our lives, but the process is the gift he's actually trying to give to us. And at this season of the year where gifts are ever present on our mind, who else do we have on our list that we need to get a present for? I know I'm right there with all of you, just trying to check off that list of all my loved ones that I want to just gift them something in thanks for our relationship. I always love to just look at the process that I'm currently in my life and see that it's a gift from the Lord, that it's meant to be a gift to be embraced and to be patient as I wait for the end result. So I just am so thankful that I was able to be with you all this morning, and I just pray blessings over each of you, that this holiday season would just be filled with his presence like never before for all of you, that you would just sit in a place where you're at his feet, just surrounded by the robes of his garment, and just embraced for exactly where you're at, that you know you're loved for exactly who you are, no strings attached, and that you just walk into 2021 with a new and fresh sense of his presence. So thank you so much, and have a blessed Sunday.